Hey everyone, welcome back. If you are new here, my name is Mary and I have a blog called therosehomestead.com where I share a ton of recipes, mostly sourdough, and also some blog posts on tips and tricks and frequently asked questions with sourdough. Now today I am making this video to answer some questions I've been getting and seeing on a lot of the different sourdough groups that I follow over on Facebook. By the way, if you want to follow our Facebook group, Sourdough Can Be Simple, the link is in the description box and we would love to have you. We're growing and we're excited. But these questions are more on the lines of artisan sourdough bread, which notoriously is the more difficult sourdough bread to make because it has different elements to it. You have stretching and folding instead of kneading. You have to score the bread. You have to learn when is the bulk fermentation over and it's time to move on to shaping. How long do I leave that shaped loaf out before I bake it or put it in the fridge, and just all these questions. And so today I'm going to be tackling in depth some of the questions that I've been getting about this. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is bulk fermentation. I get so many questions. How can I tell when my sourdough loaf or my sourdough is done with the bulk fermentation? And it can be a little bit tricky. I know it was for me as I was learning sourdough. So if you're kind of new to sourdough and all these terms kind of seem a little odd, bulk fermentation is just the first rise. And so I think that somehow we came up with a new term when it comes to sourdough artisan bread, but it really is, it's just the first rise. And what it is you mix all of your ingredients together and you can knead it and do a bulk fermentation, or you can do stretch and folds, which is essentially a slow knead that gets you the same results, but it does give you an airier crumb to your finished product than kneading does. So bulk fermentation, or the first rise, starts when you mix your dough. So the dough and the bread that I'm going to be showing throughout this video, overlaying, is just a basic artisan loaf that I threw together. It's a cup of water, half a cup of sourdough starter, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and 3 cups of flour. I did 2 cups of freshly milled spelt and 1 cup of all-purpose flour. And I mix it up and I let it soak for like 30 minutes. This is what they call the oddities, another term with sourdough. It just means to let the flour absorb all the water. So it's just a soaking. And it's really important because in order to get a good texture with kneading or with stretching and folding, it's good to let everything get absorbed properly and kind of soften, especially if you're using freshly milled flour, soften that bran and germ so that it's easier to build the gluten and the structure that you're going to need for the oven spring later on. So I mixed up this dough at around 8 o'clock in the morning and I let it sit until 8:30. And then I come back and I started stretching and folding. Stretching and folding is pretty simple. I have talked about this in other videos, but it's just lifting up a piece of the dough, folding it back on itself, and then doing that all the way around the bowl, usually about 4 turns. I do that 4 times every 30 minutes. And then after that, I cover it up and put it away and let it just sit on the counter. Now, for my starter, which is a very mature, active starter, about 4 hours, I need to go ahead and get this shaped and in the refrigerator because especially in summer, fall, late spring, it just gets too warm in here to do like an extended fermentation. In the winter, I can let that go for like 6, 7, 8 hours and it'll be fine. But when it's warmer in the house, I go about 4 hours and then I'm going to move on to shaping. Now, how can you tell when the bulk fermentation is ready to move on to the next phase? It's tricky. And my advice, if you're brand new, is pretty simple. tear just a tiny little piece of that dough off and put it in a half-pint mason jar and just put like a loose lid on it and watch that little piece and watch it. And when it grows, you're not really looking for double with this sourdough. You're looking more for 20-30% increase in size. Some recipes that I do, like sandwich loaves, you can go with that double because it's confined in this space where it will rise up. But with just in a bowl, it's going to spread out a lot. And so it's really hard to gauge when it's double. And because it's so slow, you don't really notice it quite so much. So when you see that little piece of dough that you put in that half-pint jar, like, has grown, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, depending on your starter, then go ahead and shape your dough. I always say it's better to underproof just a little bit than go to the point of no return and overproof, because once you overproof, you're going to have a hard time with an artisan loaf. You can throw that dough in a loaf pan, and make a great loaf of bread. But to get it to keep its shape in the oven and get a good rise, once you overproof, it's just probably going to be quite flat when you get it out of the oven. So I always err on just a little bit underproofed and then shape it. So mine was about 4 hours. Now, when it comes to shaping, I just did a blog post with a video and with pictures on shaping and how laid back and simple my shaping method is. And so I'm going to leave that in the description box below, because I wanted to do that so that it would maybe relax you a little. When I first started shaping sourdough bread, I was a mess because I was like, I don't know what it's supposed to feel like. And it was a disaster because I was so confused. And I had watched so many different methods that I was trying to do them all, and it was just bad. And so I wanted to write a blog post about that you could refer to when you're brand new at shaping sourdough. So I will leave that down below. So I shaped my sourdough after the 4 hours bulk fermentation, and I put it in my Banneton basket, and I go straight in the fridge. Now, you can leave that sit out for a little while and then go in the fridge, but I find that, especially this time of the year, when we're just going into the cool days, so the day that I made this bread that you're seeing overlaid here, it was really warm. And so if I don't go ahead and put it straight in the fridge, it's going to overproof it. And even then, it is like really ready to bake by the next morning, and it's really puffy and almost overproofed. So that shows you will still get quite a proof in the fridge. So don't be afraid to put your dough in there right away after you shape it. It will still proof overnight. And if you do it right away, you won't have to worry about it overproofing. Now, the next question, so I hope that helped you. Let me backtrack a little. With your bulk fermentation, you're looking for about a 20-30% rise. You want it to kind of dome. You don't want it to be flattened out. You want it to have just a little bit of a dome, as you can see in the video, so that it looks, you can tell and you can feel it. You can feel that it has some air. It is not going to be like a yeast loaf that'll blow out of the bowl sometimes, but you'll be able to tell that it has got carbon dioxide built up, and you can feel it in that dough. It shouldn't be really sticky whenever you press on it, and it should just, it should feel like it's pillowy, I guess is the word. And that's going to take a different amount of time for different temperatures, for different humidities, different starters. And so just take that little piece off and put it in the jar and watch that, and you'll start learning what that big bowl of dough looks like when this little dough in the jar was ready. And it really does help, I promise. Now, the next big question is scoring. Scoring is quite subjective. let's just say. What the whole purpose of it is just to make a place so that your sourdough can open up and expand. If you don't do it, it will still be good bread, and it may just have what they call a blowout on the side or something like that, and it's still fine. I've made sourdough bread without scoring it many times, and it turned out just fine. But if you want to learn how to score properly, a couple of tips I'll give you. Definitely you want to do in the fridge for that second rise, because that firms up the loaf enough that that razor blade goes through really nicely and doesn't drag, because it'll drag on room temperature dough almost every time. And so once you get that feel, you want a 45 degree, you don't want to go straight in on it, but a 45 degree turn on that blade, and you want to just quickly make a score. Now you can do some little designs. I always do because it's fun and I enjoy doing it. But that big slash is the expansion slash. That's the one where your dough is going to blow up out of it. It's going to expand out of it. And how deep to go? I've been doing this for a long time, and sometimes it just doesn't get deep enough. And sometimes it's too deep and I don't really pay attention to it. But it's really important to you. Here's the tip of the day. Put your loaf in the oven for 10 minutes. Carefully get it out, take the lid off, and reach down in there and do your score. And you will be able to tell when you've got it just right, because it has kind of par baked. And when you slice through that, you're going to see exactly how that's going to open up. And then you'll get the perfect score. Now, if I'm going to be photographing a loaf, that's what I'm going to do, because I want it to look perfect. But if I'm just baking a loaf for here and for us, and I'm not really concerned with it being perfect, I just give it a good, like I go through it once and then I'll kind of go through it just a little bit more, probably about a ½ an inch deep is what I do. And it turns out fine. And sometimes I get a beautiful ear. So, especially if I wait and do it after it's par baked. So, all right, that was a lot of information about sourdough and really just kind of tipping the surface on it. But I hope that if you have had these questions, that kind of watching this and me explaining it will give you some better ideas of what it looks like, what it should feel like, and how you should approach it. I approach everything relaxed, as most people will tell me that they can see by my videos. I'm very laid back when it comes to baking and cooking. I don't like fussiness in anything. I don't like drama. I don't like anything like that. I like everything to be simple and, just easy. And sourdough is no different. And so when I make my loaf of sourdough bread, is it always perfect? No. It is. I've been critiqued so many times by people that says, that's a little underproofed, or that's a little overproofed. And that's true. I'm not going for perfection with my sourdough. I'm going for a decent loaf of bread that is delicious. And I do want a bit of a rise, a good rise, so that we can make sandwiches out of it. But other than that, I don't fuss a lot with exactly how it looks or exactly, the technicalities of it. And I don't think most of y'all do either. I think that that's just a group of people, and that's great that they have learned how to perfect sourdough. And I guess if I applied myself, I could do the same thing, but I got a lot going on, and so I don't have time to really fuss with it that much. But I hope this has helped you all and gives you a relaxed way of looking at bulk fermentation, scoring, and things like that. If you have any questions, leave them in the description box below. And I'd like to know, what is your biggest hurdle when it comes to sourdough? I'm working on something, and it's going to take a while. So I'm giving y'all a little, hint. I'm working on something. And so I want to know what your biggest hurdle is when it comes to sourdough. Now, this project that I'm working on is going very slow because I want it to be worthwhile. So it's nowhere near anywhere in the near future, but it's something that I'm intentionally, slowly working on. And I can't wait to talk more about it as it comes together. But I need to know your hurdles when it comes to sourdough. And do you learn better by someone talking to you, or do you learn better by the camera just being on the project and watching the hands work, or a combination? Let me know. I really need to know, because as I go further into this project, I'm going to need your all's input. So you'll be noticing me asking questions in the coming months about this little project. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. Again, check the description box down below for blog posts that relate to this topic, and we will see you all on the next video.